A very good morning, and you're welcome to this week's Signpost webinar. We're joining you from the end of a busy week of the ploughing. We hope you all had a good week there, and that you managed to get your cars out okay. I know it was a slippery few days towards the end, but I think everybody got a good kick out of the ploughing this year, and we do hope you got a chance to call into the Teagasc marquee as well, where there was lots to see there. So look, we hope you're keeping safe and well, and wherever you're joining us from today. So today we're going to be talking about short food supply chains, and in particular a project called AgroBridges, where the goal is to foster demand-driven innovation through a combination of decision support and other digital tools, including communication materials, training programs and events, which will all be accessible in one place through the AgroBridges toolbox. And to tell us more about this exciting project, we have Dr. Jennifer Attard, who's a postdoctoral researcher in food systems with Teagasc, and also, with MTU, beg your pardon, and then Professor Maeve Henshin, who's head of the Agri-Food Business and Spatial Analysis Department with Teagasc. So welcome to Maeve and to Jennifer. Good morning. Can you hear us okay there?
Thanks, Mark. Hello. Hi, everyone.
So Jennifer, you're based in MTU. Maybe could you tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing there?
Yeah, so I'm part of the Circular Bioeconomy Research Group in MTU in Kerry. So we work on a lot of I suppose, projects related to adding value to biomass, for example, and different things like that. But personally, a lot of the work that I do is related to food waste and food waste prevention, and I suppose supporting local food systems and sustainable food systems that can withstand, I suppose, a lot of the challenges that we're seeing today.
Good. And you're coming to us from a slightly more exotic location than in the Munster region. You're in Malta this morning. So yeah. You're very good to join us from your break there. So we do appreciate that. And Maeve, good morning to you.
Morning, Mark.
So Maeve, you're heading up the Agri-Food and Business and Spatial Analysis Department. I'm sure I've left something out there. You're based in Ashtown, Maeve. Could you tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing there?
That's right. Yeah, I'm based in Ashtown, but our department is based across Ashtown and Athenry. And our work really is based on the social and geographical sciences. And I suppose we're trying to address some of the head-wrecking questions regarding kind of how can we support innovation in terms of more sustainable food systems? How can we develop the bioeconomy, and trying to think about, the systems level issues, the linkages with the innovation system and the behavioral changes that are required to lead to these kind of to more sustainable food systems generally, I suppose. So okay. we deal with a lot of the head-wrecking questions, but not sure we get answers to it all. But I suppose we try to eat the elephant one bite at a time and answer some of the questions at least.
Yeah. So look, taking a macro look at our food supply chains and production systems. So no, that's something I think is really topical at the moment. And I was at a conference there a couple of weeks ago, and one of the speakers was making the statement about his view was that never had people cared so much about the food that they're eating, but yet we're so far removed from how their food is produced as well, with some of these longer food supply chains. So yeah, really interesting area, and looking forward to both of your presentations. So I think, Jennifer, you're going to start us off with the first part of the presentation. And just while you're getting your slides ready there, just to remind everybody that today's session is being recorded and is available, will be available on the Teagasc YouTube channel, as well as our podcast version of the webinar is available on all of the various different podcast platforms, along with the slides as well on the Teagasc website. And please do send us your questions or comments if you have any comments on today's or offering your own opinion on food systems and short food supply chains. We'd love to hear from you. Just use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and that'll get straight to us. So Jennifer, we'll hand straight over to you, and we will chat to you after the presentation.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark. So I suppose I'll start with just an overview of the project, the AgroBridges project, and I suppose why we're doing this. So AgroBridges is all about building bridges between food producers and food consumers. So trying to kind of create those closer links between the food producer and the food consumer, because very often, you know, consumers don't actually know who is making their food, and there's a lot of issues that come with that. So yeah, so I suppose I'll start off by explaining the food supply chain, the way that it happens at the moment generally. So this is an example of a conventional food supply chain. So you'll have your food producer, so a farmer, for example, growing potatoes or something like that, and that might go to, you know, the food from there will go to some kind of processing facility. So say they'll get those potatoes and chop them up into chips, for example, and process them and package them, and then from there, those chips might go into some kind of like distribution system, and that could be national or it could be international as well. So there's large distances that the food can cover there, until eventually it makes it to some kind of wholesale or resale point, and then wholesale or retail point, and then from there it'll either go to food service like a restaurant, for example, or cafes, or it'll go to your homes, and that's where eventually we eat the food. So this is very normal. Most of the food that we eat today goes through all of this process. But like I said, there's a lot of kind of challenges that happen because of this then, and a lot of issues that we face. So one of the things, for example, I think the most obvious one is the food miles and the environmental impact that all of that has. So if you have food that's, instead of coming from, you know, your local areas, coming from across the globe, that's a lot of fuel that needs to transport that. That's a lot of even storage facilities and the energy that's required to store things and keep them chilled or frozen, for example, as they go all the way from the farmer to your home. That's a huge amount of energy that isn't necessary so much if you shorten all of these steps. Another issue that we see is food waste. Food waste is a huge issue today. I think most people know that almost 40% of our food, of the food that we grow, is wasted, which is a huge number if you think about, for example, all of the land, all of the resources that go into growing food, even the land itself. If you think about all the land, like 40% of the land that's used, for example, to grow food, if we could forest that instead, what a difference that would make if we weren't wasting that. So there's food waste that happens at every single step. There's food waste that happens on farms. Sometimes it's very unavoidable, but it does happen. And a lot of the food waste that happens on farms generally, particularly with horticulture, we found happens due to their contractors, for example, with retailers. So that can happen. For example, they'll have to produce large quantities of broccoli, for example, that are a certain shape and size and so on. And whatever they produce that's out of spec essentially gets plowed back into the field and not used. However, if they had a direct link to the consumer, they could sell these products nonetheless. So there's a lot of food waste that happens at each of these steps. However, if you shorten the food supply chain, for example, if you're not doing so much processing, or if you're not supplying to large retailers or these kinds of things, then you very easily eliminate all the food waste that happens along those steps. And then there's the issue of food security, of course, as well, and keeping food local, growing our own food here. It's very important that we have our own source of food. So what we're trying to do through this project is to shorten the food supply chain, so to remove, like I said, all the different steps along the way. And economically, that makes a lot of sense as well. Even if you think about the return that farmers get for their food, if, for example, the processor is taking a cut of the food and the distributor is taking a cut of the price of that food, and then the retailer as well, you can imagine that or a lot of you probably know that the price that the farmer is getting at the end of the day, for starters, they're not deciding their price, and then it's also a very, very low price that they're getting. However, if they sold directly to their consumers, they can choose the price that they can get, and they can set a fair price for their product that reflects all the work that they've put into growing that food. So yes, and there's a lot of other benefits as well. There's a lot of communication that comes if you're buying food directly from the farmer, and then you're going to learn a lot about the food and how it's grown, and you're more likely to value it better as well. If it's your neighbor or your friend who grew the food, you're less likely to throw it away, rather than if there's no face or no information at all, I suppose, no connection to that food and how it was grown, then you might think, oh look, that's just €1, I'll throw it away, whatever. But like I said, if it's your friend and you know how much effort they've put into growing it, you're much less likely to throw it away. So that's short food supply chains, essentially, are those kinds of shorter food supply chains. So they have as few links as possible between the person who produces the food and the consumer who eats the food at the end of the day. So there's different ways that you can have shorter food supply chains. So there's kind of on-farm direct sales, such as a farm shop. There's roadside sales or pick your own, which is less common in Ireland. But there's farm level food service, which we're starting to see a little bit, and community supported agriculture, which is where, for example, people might share the risk with the producer by agreeing in the start of the year, look, I'm going to purchase food from you for the entire year. And they'll pay a certain amount of money. And then if the farmer, for example, does very well, then the consumer will get a lot of food. And if the farmer doesn't do as well, then the consumer will get less food. But in that way, the farmer's risk is shared. So if they have a bad year, they're not going out of business. And that's fair enough, really. And if you want to, have local food and support the local food businesses in your area, then that would be one way to do it. There's other business models as well. There's off-farm direct sales, like vegetable box schemes, and then there's others as well that have one intermediary. So one example, for example, that we have in Kerry is we have like these small cheese shops, and that's really handy because it saves the producer having to kind of market and promote their own product. And there is that one intermediary there that's able to be really knowledgeable on the product in the shop and say, know exactly where it comes from, and just be that link between the producer and the consumer, and they're able to kind of market it for you that way as well. So that's what we're trying to do through AgroBridges, is to promote those kinds of business models. It's a €3 million project over the last 3 years. And it's coming to an end now in December. So we're just here to kind of show you our final results and what we've done during the project. We've created some tools and that should support short food supply chains. And there's 15 different partners in the project. So in Ireland, it's ourselves at MTU and Teagasc, who you'll hear from Maeve now. And then I suppose I'll pass on to Maeve now. And after that, I'll explain a little bit about the toolbox and give you some examples.
Great, thank you very much, Jenny. As Jenny said, I'm going to talk about some of the research that we did, and I'll just get that into full screen mode for you there now. Okay, so I'm very pleased to be here to talk to you about some of the research that we did in Teagasc in terms of short food supply chains, and I particularly want to acknowledge my colleague John Hyland, who did a lot of the work in this area. Sorry, is that in full screen mode for everybody there? Yeah.
Not quite. It's
not quite. Okay.
we can see the edit mode there. So
yeah, no,
you'll be operating from 2 screens, are you?
I am. Yeah. So so if I stop share and then just get rid of the 2 screens, how do I do that? Sorry now.
You could also just use the display settings. Go back in again where you were and use the display settings tab up at the top.
Yeah.
Display settings tab up at the top.
No, just go into full screen mode there now with your tick at the bottom. Yes.
Yeah.
I think you're already on full screen.
I'm on full screen. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you escape out of full screen there and go up to slideshow at the top. Across. Yeah. That's it.
Can I get underneath that?
Okay, you might have to stop sharing.
Okay.
Or else share your other screen. If you shared, actually, yeah, if you maybe go into sharing and share rather than the first screen, that might be the simplest way to do it.
Share screen too.
Joys of technology. It's always the way, isn't it?
So I'm sharing screen too, and I put that into full screen mode and see, does that work? Okay, you getting that now?
No.
No, I have full screen mode on one of them. Wait till I see. No, just
determined not to work.
Okay.
Not to worry.
No. Yeah. What have we got now? There. Okay, I got it.
Okay, we're back to you.
Sorry now.
Of course, we'll edit all of this out, Maeve, on the recording, so you don't need to worry about it. It's only our live audience this morning that are.
Yeah. Sorry.
I can also, if you like, I can continue my presentation until that sorts if you prefer. But
have you got? Is that coming?
Yeah, we can see now. We can see the edit mode. And can you click up on slide show there?
Is that on full screen mode yet? Now, hold on.
No. So if you press the escape key.
Now.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Now.
So I did the manual thing. I just unplugged the second screen. So that was the solution.
Okay. Brilliant.
So sorry. So we'll just get into this then. So I suppose Jenny was pointing out there that short food supply chains benefit because they have benefits for sustainability because they reduce food miles and things like that. But there are also indirect impacts of short food supply chains on sustainability in terms of learning and participation. And that's because, you know, the farmer and the consumer can engage quite directly with each other, and they can, you know, have mutual learning, and you're creating more awareness about sustainability related issues in the food system. Sorry. So I suppose just there's also recognition that on the demand side as well, you know, we're not just in terms of trying to address sustainability challenges. It's not just about looking at solutions on the production side. Organizations like the IPCC recognize that we also need to have demand side interventions, such as modifications in terms of food choice, addressing food loss and food waste, also to reduce emissions and enhance food system resilience. And the short food supply chains, because of that engagement between producers and consumers, can shift attitudes towards foods. In some contexts, they can promote health because of the agricultural practices and food production and processing techniques used. For example, they tend to use lower inputs. They may use more traditional heritage varieties, for example, that have kind of slightly different nutritional profiles to conventional products. And local foods, because is oftentimes seen as fresher and less processed, and in that regard it can be promoted as a healthy option. And obviously then in terms of sustainability from the farmer side, short food supply chains can, you know, improve farm incomes, promote sustainable farm systems, and because they can also support other businesses and contribute to the development of businesses by people off farm, they can contribute more generally to local and rural economic development. And then again, I suppose from a broader perspective, because short food supply chains promote the localization of food, they don't just preserve livelihoods, they can also support traditional farm landscapes and the rural heritage as well. So I suppose thinking about short food supply chains in the context of sustainable food systems, they have potential to have a much bigger impact than just reducing food miles. So because obviously for short food supply chains to work, you have to have a market, you have to have a demand from consumers. We conducted some research within the AgroBridges project to look at this issue. And look, some work has already been done in terms of asking consumers what they think about short food supply chains, but oftentimes the producer and consumer perspectives have been conflated, and most of this work really has happened on an individual country basis rather than a pan-European basis. So we know that changes in consumer behavior have driven a renewed interest in short food supply chains. Consumers are looking for safe, fresh, nutritious food that they believe short food supply chains can provide. Some of them are also seeking alternatives to the conventional system. But even though we know that consumers can declare such interests, you know, how is that actually translating into behavior? What are the key motivations that are driving people to enact this behavior that they claim to be interested in? And what are the barriers relating to that? So we did a pan-European survey, an online survey across 12 countries who have partners in the AgroBridges project. And in each country, we had at least 200 responses, with the result that we had almost 2,500 consumers who participated in our survey. So quite a significant database to enable us to do our analysis. So the first thing we did was try to find out, you know, how many of these consumers in our sample actually bought food through short food supply chains. And if we look at the middle row there in the table, you know, there's about 12.9% say they did not buy any short food products, any foods through short food supply chains. So that means that, you know, almost 90% of consumers do. Now, there is a considerable range in that, with about half of the consumers in our sample saying that they bought, you know, between 1 and 25% of their foods. And obviously, you know, at the upper end, then there was only about almost 10% of consumers who said that they bought half of their foods through short food supply chains. So then asking them about the types of products that they produced, we can see that the types of products that they purchased most frequently really were fruit, herbs and vegetables, baked goods, eggs and dairy. And, you know, obviously, I suppose we'd expect, due to the shelf life of such products, they would tend to be purchased more frequently than products that might have a longer shelf life. But so we found that meat, fish and other products, including fruit and others, the other category includes juices, they tend to be bought less frequently. We then looked at the analysis in terms of what's happening across Europe. Again, the most frequently purchased product was fruit, veg and herbs and baked goods. And on a monthly basis, if we look at the blue line that goes across there, that's the products that are purchased on a monthly basis. In Ireland, we see that it's meat, dairy and eggs that tend to be purchased with such frequency. Spain is the country there in the brown line, and that is the country that stands out to a certain extent because it is the one that has the highest frequency across all the product categories. And that just shows where Ireland is there. And Ireland tends to be in line with most of the other countries. It's just in relation to baked goods, we're slightly higher than Denmark and Finland, but still a little bit off the others. And just in terms of variation, we can see most of the variation is in terms of baked goods. There's quite a similar profile across the other categories. So then asking consumers, why would they buy foods through short food supply chains? And if we look at the top bar there, we can see that the major motivation for consumers to purchase products through short food supply chains is really down to the sensory aspects, the hedonic aspects. It's about quality. They value the taste, freshness and healthiness of the products. Other consumer motivations relate to food safety concerns, and that's with regards to their motivations to buy through short food supply chains is because they're concerned with food safety aspects in the conventional chain. They're also motivated to support local farmers and producers, support the local economy, and they also buy through short food supply chains because they trust short food supply chain producers. So I suppose we can see really there's a range of motivations. If we think about sustainability as encompassing economic, social and environmental aspects, we can see, right, it's the economic and social aspects tend to be quite high up here, whereas ones about the environmental attributes of the products, the lower transport miles from source to store, they tend to be a bit lower down in terms of motivations there. Moving on to the barriers. So why would consumers not purchase through short food supply chains? We can see that the top one there really is about access. There is a lack of local outlets, lack of market stalls, shops or restaurants that sell short food supply chain products. Other barriers there relate to product affordability. Such products are seen as more expensive than the conventional. There can be variability in product quality. Obviously that's tied in to a certain extent with issues such as seasonality as well. And issues related to communication are quite high up there as well. So the consumers find they can't differentiate between short food supply chain products and conventional. They find that producers don't effectively communicate with them. They don't really understand the benefits of short food supply chains. So a lot of communications related aspects there. So that they were identified as barriers in our consumer survey. We did a bit of a more detailed analysis then to cluster the consumers based on their motivation scores. So we put all their scores relating to motivations into one measure, all the barriers into one measure, and the purchase frequency into a score as well. And we clustered consumers based on their similarities across those three scores. And we found, that there really isn't a clear relationship between the higher levels of frequency of purchase and motivational factors. So if we start there looking at cluster one, they have the lowest motivation score. So that's, if you look across the top one, they have the most negative score at minus 1.18, but they actually have the highest purchase frequency. So, they don't have strong motivations to purchase such products, but they actually purchase such products quite frequently. And then if we look at the second cluster, they have the highest motivation score and they have the highest barriers. So that then those barriers seem to come into play more strongly for these consumers, and they have quite a low purchase frequency. So we just found really that there was an interesting interplay between the motivations and barriers so the higher scores for motivations and the lower scores for barriers did not necessarily translate into higher purchase frequency. And there's I suppose we don't really know why that is, but I suppose we're hypothesizing a number of reasons for that. And I suppose one is it's about habits. If we look at the consumers on the right hand side, they have a high barrier score, and yet they have the highest frequency of purchase. And we're guessing that, you know, habits or form a significant or have a significant role here. So such consumers are already buying such products, and maybe then the barriers are not a significant. They don't feel those barriers as strongly because they have such habitual behavior and that they don't find such barriers so burdensome. And we're also aware from looking at literature that there is seen to be a green gap. So while consumers might be motivated to buy certain products, that doesn't translate into behaviour. And sometimes that's because consumers can have competing values. So on the one hand, consumers might be motivated to support their local producer to improve their environmental credentials. But on the other hand, they want something that is very tasty and fulfills their needs from a sensory perspective. So they might find those values conflict. So I think it's just very interesting to see that we need to do a little bit more to understand how motivations and barriers actually translate into purchase frequency with regard to short food supply chains, and looking at the size of the clusters there and the interactions between them. And we believe there may be a greater, maybe more beneficial to focus on the barriers rather than channeling motivations. So in terms of addressing those barriers, the access and the availability of outlets is a key one. So I think there's a significant role for the local authorities to ensure that there are facilities for farmers markets, and we've come across some nice examples in AgroBridges whereby farmers markets can work with the large retailers and have farmers markets in place in the retail environment. And we have some examples of that in Cork as well. I know the Mahon Point shopping centre in Cork, that they have a farmers market on that site as well. So there's a nice kind of opportunity for the conventional retail sector and the short food supply chain kind of sector to link together. There's also significant potential for collaborative initiatives to overcome barriers. So you can have producer groups and cooperatives whereby different farmers and come together and give a broader product range and can reduce costs and sell it at lower price to consumers. And in relation to the price being a barrier as well, that there's a huge potential to focus on communicating the value of the product, explaining to consumers the benefits of short food supply chains. And the AgroBridges tools that Jenny's going to tell you a little bit about more further just now do very much address those issues. So I'll just hand over to Jenny, who's going to talk to you about some of the solutions that we have put in place to address some of the barriers there and to support the frequency of consumption.
Thanks, Maeve. So I'll just continue sharing my slides there. So thanks to kind of a lot of the research there that Maeve was talking about, we were able to create a number of tools. So based on kind of, I suppose, the barriers that we saw or the needs that we saw, then we created a number of tools that can address all of those barriers and the needs as well. So we've developed 12 tools, and these 12 tools are available online on the website you can see above there, so agrobridges-toolbox.eu, and they are completely free. Obviously, it's an EU-funded project, so this is free for everyone to use, and we've translated them into, they're in 12 different languages. So these are the languages, I suppose, of the partners in the project, and of course they're in English as well. So the tools are kind of split into 3 categories. So we have, I might start with communication and training tools. So these are basically downloadable files. So PDFs, for example, that will give you tips and advice, or videos as well, and that'll give you tips and advice, and basically just information that can support your business if you are looking to change over into a kind of shorter food supply chain type of business model. And then we have event tools. So say you wanted to promote your business, your food business, and you wanted to organize like an online or an in-person event. We have some tools there as well to help that. And then we have the IT tools that are more interactive, I suppose, such as the AgroBridges Net, which is a networking tool, essentially. So like people who are in a local area can look at working together, for example, and say, look, oh, I have these facilities, but I need this, and someone says, oh, I could use these facilities and I'm able to pay this or that or whatever. So that's kind of that's a list of the 12 tools. I won't go through all 12 of them now because otherwise we'll be here for another hour, but I'll go through a few quickly. I've just taken a few screenshots of them just to show you what they look like. So this is the homepage of the toolbox, and so you kind of create an account and log in there. And the first tool that I'll show you is the We Need Local Food tool. So like it says there, so it's guidelines basically for social media. So this is, like I said, it's one of those kind of just downloadable PDFs. It's really easy, and it just gives you loads of information about, for example, the different platforms that you can use on social media. Some people might be more familiar with Facebook, but maybe, for example, like I'd be more familiar with Facebook, but I wouldn't be more familiar with Instagram or these kinds of things. So this will just kind of give you some advice on what the different platforms are that are out there and how to use them, and what kind of audience you would have and age range and these kinds of things. That gives you advice for how to find pictures for posting on social media, and where to sort of download free images. And this is just a few examples now. It's a much longer document than this. And it'll also give you examples of different posts that you could post. So like, what does a post look like? Say if you're trying to promote your food business, what are the different things that you could say in there, and what are the messages that you could include? So another tool that we have is called the Label Me tool, and this is basically guidelines for labeling short food supply chains, for short food supply chain products, or like kind of more artisan products. So it can be really difficult. I imagine if you're used to maybe going into or not kind of branding your own product, and all of a sudden you have to do this, and you're going to you've decided to sell your product locally and only in Ireland and have it as more of an artisan product, then what are the rules of labeling your product? So there's all the regulations in here, but apart from just regulations, we also have kind of advice for how to create a prototype and what kinds of size and designs and things, on the front of a label, on the back of a label, and different things, and design tips, again, different kind of branding aspects such as color schemes and trademarks, and all of this information is in there in the Label Me guides, it's very handy. So the next tool that I'll explain is the support for food procurement. So essentially, one of the challenges that a smaller business might have is that they might not be able to apply for kind of larger tenders in their area. The tenders that usually come out for starters require you to produce large numbers of large amounts or quantities of food, which if you're a small business you might not be able to do. But also the kind of rules and expectations in there might not be suitable for smaller businesses. So what we've done here is we've created two guides. So one is for public bodies who are releasing tenders to help them make those tenders more appropriate for smaller businesses. So just to make it easier for them to apply, and then or even possible for them to apply. And then we have another guide that's for the producers themselves. So if they wanted to apply for a larger tender, say if the tender was okay for kind of smaller amounts of foods, that would be fine, but maybe it gives them advice on how they can cooperate with other food businesses to make them eligible for such tenders, which can give them really good, winning tenders like this can give you a really good, I suppose, it's very reliable source of income over time. So I'll move on to the next one, which is the Know Your Local Food. So this is a document again, which just explains local food. So it gives you, even if, for example, not just for yourselves to learn, but also if you were trying to promote your products again, this will give you all of that information that you need. What are all the benefits of local food, aligning them with the Sustainable Development Goals? Like it explains over here, it shows you that you have higher quality and fresh, healthy produce, those producer-consumer partnerships, and so on. And the social benefits that local food can have. It explains all the different health benefits for adults and for children, and it gives you examples for how to teach all of these, even to children, through great games, for example, and word searches. It gives you advice for how to be a good facilitator, like shown over there. So the different steps for how to approach teaching this subject, I suppose, or promoting short food supply chains. And also just a number of different tips in terms of food and health and all the different qualities that your kind of fresher product can have. So I'll move on to now one of the more interactive tools. So this is one of the IT tools, which is called Why Am I Special? So this helps you find your unique selling point, essentially. So if you're going to market yourself, what helps you stand out over other businesses? So this is an Excel sheet, basically, so it's very, very easy to use. There's kind of steps there that you can see for how to use it. So essentially you will click on download the tool over there, and then you'll have an Excel sheet like this. And I've pre-populated this now already, but essentially you'll go through a number of statements and enter, you can see the numbers in blue here, on a score of 1 to 5, say my product has a high quality level in terms of freshness, flavor, and nutritional value. And you're like, I think so. So you'd put a 4 there or a 5 or so on. Whereas you think that maybe your business doesn't engage so much with the local community, so you might put a 2 over there. So you'll go through a good number of these kinds of statements, and then at the end of all of that, it will analyze your results for you, and you'll come up with a sheet basically like this. So it'll tell you that maybe the quality of your food is really good, and the sustainability is really good. The social benefits maybe are lower, and maybe you have no particular sort of product geography benefits. So like those are the kinds of things where you're talking about like Sneem black pudding, for example, where the location of your where you're producing your product is very important. And what you've scored highest in over here in this example is the health aspects and good nutrition. So if you want to really promote your product, then you can say, look, I have a really, really healthy product. That's what differentiates me from other businesses. And then not only will we tell you that through the tool, but then we'll give you advice for how to promote that kind of a message. So then you'll click on download communication materials. And for each of these product aspects here, then you can see that there's different things that you can use to promote, and it can help you with ideas for how to promote on social media and what hashtags to use for this particular message, and so on. And so it says, for example, that this can form part of a nutritional diet and diet plans and so on. So yeah, so that's the Why Am I Special tool. I'll move on to the event organization tools now. So we have the Let's Build Our Short Food Supply Chains, and this tool is all around online events, so it gives you advice for how to do that. But today I'll just quickly run through the Let's Meet tool. So this is all about organizing in-person events. And we actually tested this tool in March up in Airfield Estate, and we had a great time. It was actually really fun. So there's different events that you can promote here. So you could say you wanted to organize like an open day or a culinary event, or so on. So, or maybe an event to promote local producers. So what we organized, for example, up in Airfield Estate was a culinary event where we had like a cooking competition between a number of chefs who were all using food from local produce, and we had a great turnout for that, and it was very informative and loads of fun. So essentially what this tool and how it will help you, for example, if you wanted to organize an open day for your farm or whatever business you have, you'll just have a look through here and just download the open day events pack, and these are the files here that you can see. So there's a fact sheet, for example, that's all about benefits of that you can promote, benefits of short food supply chains that you'll be promoting on the day, guidelines for how to organize an event, invitations, and so on. So I've just put a few of the examples here. So say this is like an example of the fact sheet here. So 8 reasons why you should choose short food supply chain. So that's basically what you want to promote on the day. And these are all in PowerPoint, so you can edit away as you like. So there's flyers, for example. So if you've never created a flyer or a poster for an event before, they're all ready. You can go in and use this as it is, and just maybe put your logo in or change the photo to one of your farm and so on. You could have a sign-in sheet for your participants just to keep in touch with them afterwards, or even a program of events, which is really, really neat and handy to have all of this ready when you're trying to organize an event for the first time. And the last tool I'll explain is the decision support tool. So this is basically where you will put in information about your business, and then the tool will essentially tell you which business model makes most sense for you. So say you clicked on farm, for example, there'll be a number of questions on the location of your farm and what you're producing and the information. So say it might ask you about the population around your area. Say you're close to a city, then you might have, a much higher consumer base than if you weren't, and so on. And after you kind of input all of that information about yourself, even the activities you have going on in your business, it'll give you the results. So in this case, this person, for example, probably is producing a lot of different products, so they're able to open their own on-farm shop, and they probably are next to a good population base. So they're able to kind of hope that they'll have a good number of customers coming into the shop, and then it'll tell you all the different benefits of having an on-farm shop, for example. So you could charge a higher price premium, but you'll be selling, for example, a lower volume overall, and then it'll compare that to wholesale. It'll give you, where your price premium is much lower, but your volume is much higher and so on. So it'll give you all these things, and there's much more information in there anyway. But I'll stop there for now because I'd say I've run out of time exactly. But yeah, there's the toolbox link is there, and yeah, we'll be here for questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Maeve. That was a whirlwind tour at the end there, but I really love these types of projects because not only are you doing the research, the hard research, but you're also producing practical tools for those people to use at the end. And I think the ones that you've shown there are, I think it's fantastic, a toolbox for not just food producers, but anyone who's looking to set up a business and to do that sort of reflection on your unique selling points and so on. So congratulations, and I think it's the next step is now getting that promoted. I suppose that's part of today, but getting it out to that wider network. Could I ask, just in relation to, like, if we look at the Irish context, my perception is that we don't really have that strong a tradition of farm shops compared to when you go to other countries, even going as far as the UK. There seems to be that stronger tradition there of farm shops. Is there a particular reason for that, or is it just the way that agricultural supply chains have evolved in this country? I know that a lot of our the food that we produce on our farms, and particularly on the livestock farms, is exported. But like you're saying here, there is an opportunity to maybe to shorten some of those food supply chains at a national level. But just could maybe speak into that tradition of short food supply chains here in Ireland.
Yeah, no, I think you've a good point there, Mark. And I suppose, the focus very much in our agricultural sector has been on exports, but there are a number of other factors, I suppose, as well, looking at this at the demand side. And as I identified, one of the key barriers was a lack of infrastructure. So the local, if you compared it to the UK, but I mean, if you go to France and you see all the farmers markets, in all the major cities and towns, so the local authority has had to develop that space and has to make sure that power sources and clean up facilities and all of those were kind of organized. So I think there's a key role for the local authorities in ensuring such infrastructure is developed. And I suppose that's not something that we have been particularly strong on here. But the other thing is it comes down to, basic demographics and populations and footfall as well. In the UK, you have, it's particularly in the southeast of England, a lot of farms would have farm shops because they are quite close to centres of population, and they just, they have the market and the footfall. So I suppose they're just a few factors that come to mind for me anyway.
And just to continue on the research that you were looking at, that sample that you were looked at, and it can relate to a question that's come through here as well, in relation to that willingness to pay for food that is supplied more locally. I mean, is there a reason why it should be more expensive, or is that just maybe a misconception? Because I know some of the food producers will say the more local foods producers would tend to maybe aim for a slightly more exclusive market, perhaps. Maybe do we need more of the people that are actually, that can sell at a good value to the customer, but yet still take a decent margin themselves?
Yeah, I suppose there's two key components to that. First of all, people assume because you're taking out intermediaries, you're taking out costs. But you have to remember those intermediaries are all providing a function that costs something. So in essence, if you're taking out those functions, you're reallocating the cost somewhere else. So in some instances, you're reallocating the cost to the primary producer. The primary producer now has to do the sales element, has to do the storage, has to do the communications. And then in some instances, you're expecting the consumer to do the transport bit. So if you're expecting the consumer to do the transport bit, it's reasonable that they might expect a slightly lower cost. So there's a whole heap of different elements going on there whereby costs are actually being shifted. The same functions have to occur, but they're being shifted along the chain. And I suppose and that can result in different expectations with regard to price, but can also result in different costs. So there are some of the issues there. But then going back to the point about, value, I think that is a key thing with regards to the short food supply chains. And consumers are buying it not just because of the taste and the texture and all of those. They do value the support for the local producer. They do value the benefits to the rural economy, and consumers want to feel good about their purchases, not just because things taste nice, but they do want to feel good about their purchases, and they do want to feel that they're making a contribution. But not everybody can afford to do that if the product is more expensive, and there is certainly a gap between the intention and the behavior, as we found in our research as well.
And Jenny, if I could ask you about the actual supports then that are available there to assist farmers in making that decision to move to a short food supply chain model, what's beyond what's within the AgroBridges, which is really obviously really practical and helpful, but what's the support landscape like there in Ireland? Or maybe I know Spain was given an example that there was particularly good or more frequent short food supply chains are being in use there.
Yeah, so yeah, there definitely are kind of other countries that are doing better in this than Ireland at the moment. But I think that is changing. I think the supports aren't too strong at the moment. Like I know there are a few things, obviously, like with labeling, the regulations for kind of small artisan products are a little bit easier than they would be for larger products. But still, I think a lot of the subsidies and things are based on kind of being more large scale and export and all of that. So that's something that we're hoping to see shift somehow. How that happens is obviously very complicated, but there would have been the strategy, the horticulture strategy, the national horticultural strategy that came out. So that's trying to support more shorter food supply chains as well. I don't know, is there too many kind of direct actions in there so far? But at least the intention is there, that we're seeing from the government already. So hopefully that'll play out soon. Yeah.
Okay. Pat, some interesting questions coming in from our audience.
Yeah, I suppose one very basic one in general, can food producers expect higher margins from short food supply chain systems compared to business as usual? I mean, it's a fundamental issue.
I suppose, yeah, well, that would be a key motivation for farmers, obviously, in terms of supplying short food supply chains. But I was actually at a webinar yesterday, which involved AgroBridges and two of our related projects. And one of the recommendations from that project is that we should have a full cost or economic evaluation of the costs of producing for short food supply chains. So even though the farmer might get a higher margin, they are providing more functions, so they are providing the sales and all of that as well. So if you looked at what they're actually contributing, they're contributing more. They should be getting a higher cost, but whether they're actually being rewarded for that extra bit or not, that's that would require, I suppose, a bit more detailed analysis. And it varies on a case to case basis, as well, in terms of what you're offering, the volumes that you're offering, the actual short food supply chain that you're selling through. There's a lot of multiple factors there that would impact on the. There isn't a simple answer to that, but there would need to be a consideration of the extra services that are being provided as well.
There's a few issues around what exactly is defined as under the short food supply chain. So, for instance, if you're getting into a relationship with a local supermarket to supply, is that considered under the definition? I suppose a lot of our butchers tend to operate on the basis of getting supply locally from local farmers and building relationships there. Is that considered short food supply chain? It's just as to exactly what is the definition there.
There's different definitions. I suppose during the project we would have decided on one to work with for the 3 years. But like I said, it's as few links as possible. So I mean, definition varies. What we kind of took for this is we took a national approach for Ireland, and yeah, with a maximum of one intermediary. And ideally what we would have looked at is that intermediary being a small local business, to kind of boost the, because that supports also boosting the local economy and so on, as opposed to kind of you went to a larger retailer. But again, I mean, if you have a local food product in a business locally. I suppose that is a short food supply chain, but again, we would be trying to kind of promote other types of businesses.
And I suppose another question there with reference to the Irish market, do you see that there is a significant opportunity for food producers here, and what are the factors that need to be brought to bear if that's going to materialize?
Suppose it's how do you define significant, I suppose, is the question there. You know, I think there is a lot of potential for short food supply chains. You know, and you know, Jenny gave the example of the community supported agriculture. There's a lot of urban agriculture. There's grow your own, and then there's quite unique short food supply chains such as the Airfield Estate in Dublin. You know, which is kind of that urban farm, which very much has that educational purpose as well. So I suppose if we're trying to think about having more sustainable food systems, trying to engage producers and consumers, get people to understand about short foods, about food, how it's produced, the costs and benefits associated with it, I think we do need to put a push on short food supply chains from that, I suppose, educational perspective. The extent to which it'll be a significant diversification opportunity for farmers, that very much depends on, you know, the motivations of farmers and depends on, you know, their proximity to centres of agriculture. But I think, you know, regardless of the size or the significance of the opportunity, I think anything that allows us to question and think about how we can develop more sustainable food systems, you know, has to be considered and has to be evaluated, because, you know, there are challenges with our conventional system. We can work within the system to address some of them, but we really have to be a bit more creative in thinking about how can we change the system. And I think short food supply chains in the range of business models that exist, I think have to be part of that to some extent, at least.
Yes, just in relation to the kind of more macro level of food security within Ireland. I know I was looking at an article there. They were saying that Ireland is the second most food secure country in the world. But again, I suppose that's depending on what parameters you're looking at. And I was telling you earlier on, I was having this conversation with my daughter last night about food supply chains, secure food security, and I mean, surely there are those benefits as well of, you know, if, you know, from a risk mitigation perspective, that short food supply chains have a role to play there, and that would mean that there should be more support for these types of models to try and mitigate against that risk. Look, we saw last year, was it where the invasion of Ukraine, there was concerns about grain supplies, and now that has dissipated to some degree, but you know, we're only one invasion away from a similar thing happening again. So I just would be interested in your thoughts, comments on that.
Yeah, I think like it depends on the food product particularly as well. Like you know, when it comes to beef, if you know we couldn't export so much anymore, if anything happened or whatever, we, you know, we're definitely food secure in that sense because we export so much of it. But when it comes to fruit and vegetables, we're very much not. And you're seeing it, like I think there was an article maybe last year in the Farmers Journal. There's businesses closing down, like large you know, growers closing down their business. But we are seeing a lot of smaller kind of organic farm businesses opening up now as well, which is great. And I think there is a market for that. If you go into most of the organic shops across Ireland, at least the ones that I've been into, they're stocking a lot of organic fruit and veg from the Netherlands and from Spain. So that's a market that, you know, producers can easily tap into. And if we were able to produce that ourselves, and then we could be food secure in that sense as well, because I mean, we have the land for it and everything, especially if we're exporting so much of our food, then we definitely have enough land to produce for ourselves.
Well, there are probably bigger issues, I suppose. You know, Jenny referred to the horticultural sector there. I suppose, you know, there are plans to develop the horticultural sector and enhance that, and things like, you know, the protein strategy that's been developed at EU level. You know, there are things that we've been doing in Ireland as well. We have a number of projects at the moment looking at more plant-based proteins. We have, you know, 3 big projects: Valpropath, Protein I, and U Protein, that are all looking at how we can, you know, develop more plant-based proteins. including cereals and legumes and other crops as well. So there's lots I think we can do and probably need to do as well. Yeah.
And we have, Maeve, we have a minister who's responsible for organics and biodiversity. If we were to have a minister responsible for short food supply chains, what would you think? What would you say should be on top of their agenda if they were to look at improving the situation?
I think the minister with responsibility for horticulture is located in the Department of Agriculture. But I think if we had somebody on short food supply chains, it's a much broader issue, and I think it very much ties in with urban policy and cities like Ghent, for example. They have they have a strategy around sustainable foods, and other cities across Europe have that as well, and it's very much tied in with the health agenda. So I think that minister would have to straddle health, agriculture, and urban. So I'm not sure what you'd call that minister, but I think whatever that minister would do would have to try to link those three elements if they were trying to develop short food supply.
And the types of supports then, Maeve, like you talked about collaborative arrangements like producer groups, they have proven very successful in other parts of Europe from what I've observed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, there are some supports available for those kind of things. But again, going back to the infrastructure, supports does need to be available to provide farmers markets and infrastructure around that. Supports need to be available to farmers. There's a lot of training and supports already available to farmers to help them with selling, developing their websites and things like that. Those supports, I suppose, are already there, and just, I suppose, need to be maybe packaged a little bit for short food supply chain.
Well, there's an election in the offing, Maeve, so maybe you might consider it. Pat, lots more.
No, and I suppose again going back to definition and given the size of the market here and the relative size of European markets, is it a complete contradiction in terms to consider Irish food and artisan food and local and I suppose artisan and small farmer produced foods being exported in some way to other European countries to I suppose take advantage of the small markets, the farmer markets that are there in those countries? Is that a complete contradiction of where we should be going and thinking?
Not necessarily, I'd say. And it goes back to how you define short food supply chains as well. There's been some work that would talk about short food supply chains in terms of being spatially extended. So you think about products like the Burn Smokehouse and some of our smoked salmon producers. They have very strong markets in Germany, and they're selling direct to small retailers and consumers there. So there are opportunities, I think, to do something like that. Now, I suppose the question is then, we have to think about from an environmental impact perspective, what is that contributing to in terms of environmental impact? Your transport might be less efficient, but you are supporting the rural economy in Clare in this instance, and you have sustainable production systems. You have small volumes. You're not overfishing. So there's a lot of things like that there. So I think the concept of spatially extended short food supply chains where you can have direct sales is viable, and for certain products for Ireland, we can have very successful businesses in that space, I think.
So it's not a total contradiction in terms of the supports that are available for the establishment of markets for farmers or for groups of farmers to establish a market. Are there supports there? I know it sometimes is supported by local governments, but there's a lot of, I suppose, support schemes there for farmers. Is this an area that's been left out?
I don't think it's left out. I think there are supports there. They're more kind of general schemes than they would be kind of directly targeted. Like I don't know for small markets or things, maybe leader funding or something would be more appropriate for a business to open a kind of small market or something like that. But yeah, there aren't targeted targeted supports like that.
Okay. And you mentioned it already, is the dramatic increase in organic farming that has started over the last couple of years, is that a real opportunity to develop this sector?
I believe so. I think especially with one of the benefits of short food supply chains being that you have like local, ideally unprocessed, healthy, fresh products, from when you harvest something to, the longer time passes, the less fresh it is and the less nutritious it is. So I think if that's kind of one of our aims is to have healthy food on our plates locally, then I think then organic is obviously the way to go. And I think it's growing, and I think that it can keep growing, and as it should, because it's good for us.
Great. Well, look, we're...
No, you're going to. I'll mention just one thing. You talked to Jennifer at the very beginning about the off-size and the off-shape produce, and just an initiative that my daughter, who lives in Wellington, in New Zealand, she gets what's called a wonky box each week, which is the off-size, the ones that nobody wants, and they're perfect. So that's a kind of an idea that somebody came up with, and rather brilliant.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Why not? Yeah. Why not have something like that here in Ireland? Yeah, absolutely. We have to come up with a name, Pat. Okay, we're slightly over time. Thanks for bearing with us. But really, really interesting subject, which I think we're going to hear lots more about over the next number of months and years. But my thanks to Jennifer and Maeve for joining us today. And at just the project, we've sent out a link to that. What stage is the project at? Is it near completion?
Yeah, so the project will finish in December, but the toolbox is released as of last month, so it's out there and free to use.
Great. And the main thing is, yes, it is free, and there's lots of free resources out there. So we do encourage people to look into that. I suppose my own bugbear is that a lot of the supports coming from the government side tend to be financial or structural, and sometimes you actually need people to make these things happen. So I think there's an area to work on there. So thank you so much for joining us today. Next week, we'll be joined by Dr. Finbar O'Regan, who is Inspector with the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, and he is going to be talking to us about the National Fertilizer Database, which has just been introduced in Ireland. And so I know there's lots of questions around that whole area. So if you do have any outstanding questions, join us next Friday morning for that session with Finbar O'Regan. So until next week, enjoy the weekend, and thanks for joining us this morning, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks again.
All right.
Bye. Thanks.